Sure, so after the opening remarks, okay, sounds good.
All right, we are going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so very much for joining us. This is the Black Lives Day of Action, organized by many amazing people, including residents, nurses, medical students at UCLA, at LAC-USC, at Harbor, all of you, and Charles Drew University. And thank you all for joining us. This is really part of an incredible movement, and we are all working so hard to improve and to increase justice throughout our communities and our patients. My name is Yasmin Rawlins. I am a second-year psychiatry resident over at LAC-USC. I identify as a Black woman. And my journey to this point has included Docs for POC. So back in May, we founded Docs for POC, and it was designed as a group of healthcare professionals advocating for social justice for communities of color throughout the United States. I'd just like to briefly read our mission statement because I feel like that really encapsulates what we stand for and what we're trying to do. We at Docs for POC believe it is our duty as physicians to advocate for all of our patients' rights to health and wellness. We believe that health happens both inside and outside of the hospital or clinic. We believe it is our responsibility as physicians to address the social determinants of health, in addition to the biological determinants. We believe that the existence of health and healthcare inequalities anywhere and to any person is unjust. We believe that every person, regardless of race, ethnicity, ancestry, citizenship status or national origin, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, marital or parental status, religion, political affiliation, income, age, or disability, deserves the right to health. I would also like to acknowledge the land that we are on. We are currently standing in the territory of the Tongva and Chumash people. We would like to acknowledge our history of colonialism in this country and the ongoing colonial practices that still harm people of color and particularly Native American people today. We know that Indigenous peoples were on this land and caring for this land long before us. If you could drop wherever you are in the chat to let everyone know where everyone's coming from. And I'd like to pass off to Kelechi for opening remarks.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelechi Okpara. I'm a second-year medical student here at UCLA Drew, and also the SNMA MAPS co-coordinator. Thank you everyone for joining this virtual protest in solidarity with the Service Employees International Union strike for Black Lives. Although many of you are not able to leave work, you have still joined thousands of others protesting deep-seated and interconnected systems that work to oppress communities of color. We gather today to draw attention to the racism and economic oppression embedded in our institutions, oppression that hurts us all. These are practices all around us. We live on stolen land and continue to pollute our environment. We limit economic investment in our Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and other communities of color. We allow daily violence by police and other actors of the state. We have failed in our federal response to keep our most essential workers, many undocumented, and many being people of color in California, safe from the COVID pandemic. Our homeless and incarcerated populations, disproportionately people of color, continue to suffer outsized risks. How do you shelter in place those without shelter? How do you wash your hands without soap or sanitizer? We know too well that this pandemic is disproportionately impacting communities that already have weathered so much. Racism, poverty, sexism, nativism, ableism. Every one of these systems work in tandem to disenfranchise even the most vibrant and resilient members of our community. This is the reason we have the love for our communities and out of the hope that together we can care for one another and pull through the multiple crises of our time: racism, economic inequity, environmental destruction, and the COVID pandemic. We acknowledge protests, even after media coverage has ceased, but it is not enough to just protest. We acknowledge those around the country at this very moment holding 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence in remembrance of George Floyd, but it is not enough to hold vigil. We must turn our collective grief, anger, and indignation into actions. We must march not just on our city streets, but to the ballot box this November. We must hold our governments accountable and implement laws and policies to ensure a more just future. We must protect workers and their rights to collectively organize and form unions. We must continue to demand justice for the deceased, like Breonna Taylor, who cannot possibly rest in peace while their killers walk free. In our actions, we commit to our duty to stand against every injustice that plagues our society and takes the lives of our Black brothers and sisters. We must commit to our duty to unearth the ways that portions of our society have trampled on others in their pursuit of the American dream. But what is an American dream if Black and brown Americans from all walks of life cannot also see their own dreams fulfilled? We must dream bigger than our predecessors and lift our voices louder than those who have already worked so hard to get us where we are today. Now I would like to invite some of our community and union members to speak. Andrew?
Yes, thank you so much for that introduction, Kelechi. I greatly appreciate it. And I just want to share a couple of things with y'all today. Brothers and sisters, my name is Andrew Lewis. I'm with the North Westwood Neighborhood Council, and I'm proud to stand with SEIU today in their national strike for Black lives. I want to say that none of us are free until we're all free. Freedom is not a state, it's an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we must all take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair and more just society, said the late John Lewis. So let me repeat that. Freedom is not a state, it's a continuous act. It's a fight, it's a struggle, it's indefinite, and it's why we're gathered here today, to collectively make our voices heard, that enough is enough, that Black lives matter, that Black health matters, that Black nurses matter, that Black doctors matter. I personally call on our elected leaders to ensure that frontline workers have access to hazard pay, to sick leave, and personal protective equipment during this COVID-19 pandemic. To enable a healthy and just society, we must invest in a healthy democracy. We invite you to take action with us, to exercise your right to vote, to speak up, to get in some good trouble, and to be loud. Protect our frontline workers. So thank you. And with that, I pass it over to Sister Aqueelah Tillman for some words. Thank you.
Hi all, my name is Aqueelah Tillman and I'm a registered nurse here at UCLA Westwood campus. And I am here to speak on behalf of CNA and solidarity with SEIU. As healthcare providers, we have to understand that we work and operate in an inherently racist healthcare system. Systemic discrimination and/or racism is supported by institutional policies and implicit bias. This system affects the way that African Americans and other individuals of color experience illness, resulting in worsened outcomes and increasing levels of premature death. Registered nurses know that our patients' health is not only determined by what happens when they encounter the healthcare system, but also by the social determinants of their lives in our society. It is important as nurses to assert our presence and our expertise in any public health crises, specifically ones surrounding racism. Nurses have to accept, acknowledge, and recognize the disparities that exist. Nurses have the responsibility to be committed to understanding these systemic issues and prompting and allowing conversations that lead to direct action. As nurses, we must identify bias and address it in order to provide our patients with the necessary resources and or materials while under our care. Nurses have to be advocates for all patients. Nurses have to be at the forefront by transforming nursing education. Nurses have the ability to create and structure evidence-based programs and initiatives that decrease disparities. Nurses have to commit to promoting and being active in local and state and national policies to increase access, equity, and the health protection. It is also important that nurses are representative of the population in which they serve and understand that racism in any form is not only harmful to society, but is also a direct opposition to the values and ethical code of the nursing profession.
Thank you very much for those powerful words, Andrew and Aqueelah. And just as our ancestors relied on the power of song to move mountains and strengthen their communities, today we are going to do just that. In just a moment, we will be joined by Thrive Choir to lead us in song. Thrive Choir is a diverse group of vocalists, artists, activists, educators, healers, and community organizers who join together in big harmony. They are based in Oakland, California, and their music illuminates the joy, pain, and beauty of what it means to be human in this time of systemic transformation. Today, 2 of their artists will lead us in song. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, our goal is to create a beloved community, and that will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. We kindly remind you to keep your mask on while singing, particularly if indoors, and to maintain 6 feet apart from each other for your own safety, as well as those around you. Please join us in welcoming Thrive Choir.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. My name is Dyna, Erie, and I have been singing with the choir for 4 years now, wild. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you all so much for what you're doing. I am not gonna get too emotional, but I do feel emotional with this, being a part of this. So thank you for your work and for keeping us healthy. And so anyway, I'll sing a song that is inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. too. We turned his words into a song because we really feel the resonance with it. And if it can be something that you sing while you're walking on the street or whatever, it might help our world just turn a little bit softer and a little bit kinder. So the words are, and I'm gonna have y'all sing with me, so I'm gonna be watching. I can never be what I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. So it goes like this. And then there's 2 parts. So this is the first part. I can never be what I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. I can never be who I ought to be. Let's say who. Until you are who you ought to be. And you never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. Come on, I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. Last time, I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be, but until I am who I ought to be. Second part. This interrelated reality. Go ahead. Interrelated. Come on. this inescapable mutuality. This inescapable mutuality. All together, this interrelated reality. This inescapable mutuality. One more time. This interrelated reality. This inescapable mutuality. From the top, I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. This interrelated, yeah, reality. Come on. This inescapable mutuality. I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. This interrelated reality. This inescapable mutuality. This interrelated reality. This inescapable mutuality. Sing it big. I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. Last time, I can never be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. Thank you so much. Y'all sounded good. I heard every note.
Hello, y'all. My name is Kele Nitoto. Thank you so much, Dyna. Also with the Thrive Choir. And that was so beautiful. I'm going to sing a song. I'll probably throw a couple other songs in there, but I'm going to sing a song by Osibisa called Wo Ya Ya. And the words go like this. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know we will. There. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. All right? So let's start with that, and we see where we go from there. All right, here we go. We are going, heaven knows where we're going. We know we will. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Try that. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know we will. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We will. Let's try that. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Hey. yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Try that. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. 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 Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, hey. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know we will. Keep changing. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough. But heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Hey, oh. But Lindsay Scott said, we don't have to know the way knows the way. We don't have to plan the way, touch the way, feel your way, the way knows, the way knows, the way knows the way. We don't have to know the way knows the way. We don't have to plan the way, touch the way, feel your way, the way knows, the way knows, the way knows the way. Ha, ha, ha. It may be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but hey, the way knows the way, the way knows the way, yeah, ha, the way knows the way. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. Hey, hey, the way knows the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much to Thrive Choir for those absolutely beautiful moments of celebration and remembrance in honoring the people, many of our ancestors, who paved the way for us today and whose shoulders we now stand on. In many ways, music is healing, but it is also powerful, and it can be a source of strength in this continuous battle for justice. Before we wrap up, I'll hand it off to Kelechi once again for some closing remarks.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We would also like to give gratitude to the organizations that have a role in today's actions. SEIU, Docs for POC, CIR, LMSA, SNMA, Thrive Choir, and our guest speakers. Racial justice is an ongoing fight. Health equity is an ongoing fight. We simply cannot act once and sit back. We must tirelessly raise our voices in solidarity. We must commit to this fight, advocating for those who cannot advocate for themselves. It is our collective voices that will spark the flame for enacting change across our institution and Los Angeles County. We ask you to start those difficult conversations. Hold those accountable who perpetuate these injustices. Hold governments accountable with your vote. Hold corporations accountable by supporting and protecting unions. Hold institutions accountable by mobilizing your communities, articulating your demands, and advocating for them, like the petitions circulating for the anti-racist transformation of UCLA Health. Ask constantly, who have we hurt in our current policies? Who have we left out? And how can we serve them better? Show love to one another, but especially to these marginalized populations. Raise your voice. There is power in the words we speak, the stories we share, and the voices we uplift. We thank you all who have decided to no longer be silent. We charge you to continue to fight against these inequities with your voice and perhaps with your own unique song in your heart. Together, we are stronger than ever before, and we will not be docile. We will not be quiet. In the words of the late Honorable John Lewis, who tirelessly advocated for our precious, almost sacred right to vote, do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Thank you.
Rest in peace and power to the Honorable John Lewis. Thank you all again for joining us today. Today's gathering has been recorded and will be available later on Thrive Choir's YouTube channel. Look for Thrive East Bay on YouTube to access and share widely. If you haven't already, please register for this event at tinyurl.com/UCLA4BLM, the Eventbrite for today's action. In order to receive an email with follow-up actions, including a Zoom call on Monday, 7/27 at 6:30 p.m., where you can connect with each other and some of our resident organizers. Once again, the URL is tinyurl.com/UCLA4BLM. We encourage you now to tune into the live stream by SEIU. SEIU today is striking for Black lives, and we support them in their actions. Go to facebook.com/SEIU to hear stories from workers on why they are striking for Black lives on this National Day of Action. This concludes our event. We wish everyone peace, love, and power in the continual fight against injustice.